It's the Friday edition here on Zero Block 30, and today we have 5 rounds in the magazine. Round number 1, some were saying a man's constitutional rights were violated after he was stopped from masturbating for a 5th time on a flight from Seattle to Phoenix. Off the top of your head, Kate, do you know how long that flight is?
It can only be 2 hours, right?
2 hours and 24 minutes it took him to masturbate 4 times, which is pretty impressive considering that he's not 14. Round number 2, update to safety breaks amongst hundreds of thousands of muddy spuds. A World War II era grenade was picked up on a conveyor belt in Auckland. It's a little potato factory. They're doing potato goofing, but in fact, they were doing a little grenade goofing. We'll find out about that. Round number 3, a National Guard member gets in trouble for trying to go on the worst kind of beer run imaginable. He's probably going to go to prison for quite some time. Round number 4, we got Kate, who's going to interview ATF's agent, a former agent from the ATF, Ken Croke. Is that how you say it? Croke?
Yeah, Ken Croke. He went undercover for 2 years with the notorious Pagan Motorcycle gang. And I actually, after this interview, I was at the office and I came down and PFT commenter was sitting there. I was like, I just interviewed like one of the pagans pretty much. And he was like, oh, he thought I was talking about religion. Mm-hmm. He was like, a pagan, like, why would you interview that? And I'm like, no, the motorcycle gang. Yeah, this story's got hazing, murder, a few near-death experiences, and it's for his new book, Riding with Evil. So stay tuned.
Very fancy. And it's not, and they're much more dangerous than the other biker gang, which is the Wiccan biker.
Right. The Wiccan biker gang is not, they're more intense. Into spells.
Yeah, they have more of a Babadook kind of vibe.
It's a Babadook vibe.
Yeah. And finally, round number 5, there was a red fox on Capitol Hill that bit 9 people this week, and people were all upset in the Twitter mentions. I think it was a New York Times post that people were like, why would you put it to sleep? Because it had fucking
She's a
rabies.
Mother.
It had rabies. You got to put it down. You can't just take it out to any old deciduous forest and dump it in there and just think it's going to be fine. You don't want to get all kinds of does and things like that with rabies too.
Yeah, it's the story is pretty crazy. And then I happen to know a lot about rabies, not to brag. So we're going to do a little deep dive in on that. So
that
sick
was the
teaser
oddest
for a Friday
that I think in the history of ZBT that you just shown. I
don't
even want to wait.
Lady.
Let's just start right now. Give me some rabies facts. I don't want, that's too good of a teaser to not address right now. What's one rabies fact? Your favorite?
Okay.
Second favorite.
Okay. So the virus itself, like a lot of people like, oh, rabies, they're foaming at the mouth or whatever. It literally attacks the aggression part of the brain and it puts it on hyperdrive. So it floods the body. Their whole body starts coursing with adrenaline. You literally, there's this old podcast episode. It's super old of This American Life where this woman tells this story. She's at the bottom of her driveway and she sees this raccoon like 200 feet away. And she's like, oh, this is weird. The raccoon's out in the middle of the day walking down my driveway. So she waves her arm.
Raccoons just get on our driveway. Mama just sweep them off with a broom.
With a broom. Yeah, you just sweep them off with a broom. She waves at it, thinking it'll run into the woods. The second it sees her hand, it starts going and it starts running at her full speed. She's like, what the hell? This raccoon is over 30 pounds. The woman weighs like 112 pounds or something. She said on the podcast. She starts running away, of course. It's gaining on her fast on the driveway. So she jumps off the driveway and it's like, I'll lose it in the woods. Big mistake. The thing jumps up on her thigh. It's biting her. It's scratching her.
Lose it in the woods? Like it's never been in the woods? I mean,
right. Right.
You'd have a better shot at the mall.
Well, this is a raccoon. So she gets it down on the ground and she's a grown adult struggling. This raccoon was so like pumped with adrenaline that she couldn't do anything about it. She finally pins it to the ground. It takes forever for a family to come out. They spent, that scene in Office Space where they're all beating up the printer. The whole family, her son, the husband, and the son's girlfriend all had to take turns beating it with a tire iron. And it just for over 20 minutes, this thing just
20 minutes. That's a long time to beat something.
Yes. But listen, you feel bad. You're like,
we'll find about that in round 1.
This is the thing about rabies. They don't feel pain. This part of what makes them so crazy and rabid is they said it was unfazed. They're literally beating the shit out of this thing with a tire iron. And it was just like nothing. It turns
like PCP.
It completely turns off the pain and they don't have any fear at all. So it didn't even realize that getting hit with the tire iron was bad. It was like, just give me fucking more. I just want more. It was like going crazy. But animals become tireless too. Like nothing is going to slow them down or stop them. And they're ferocious monsters because the virus, it is like essentially a zombie. it attacks anything that moves in order to spread the disease. It takes over the brain of whatever it attacks, and its only mission is to get the disease to go elsewhere too, which is fucking terrifying. So this is the fact. I have one more fact that wasn't really a fact. It was a story. Did you know if you wake up in a room, you've been sleeping, you wake up in a room and there is a bat in the room, bats can bite you in your sleep without you feeling it. Bats have this ability to bite without you feeling it and without leaving a mark. So if you wake up in a room with a bat, you are supposed to catch the bat and get it tested. And if you can't catch it, you have to go to a doctor and have them check you out.
I guarantee you one thing, I am not going to capture it. I'm just going to get it out of my house, and I will absolutely not get tested.
So in New York State, there's only a few deaths from rabies in the last century, and it's children bitten by bats in their sleep. And the kids didn't know they were bit. Nobody knew there was a bat and rabies, and there was bats in their room in the morning, but the parents didn't know. And it turns out the bats had rabies, and they didn't know that the bats bit the kids. That's a great way to start a Friday episode.
And that'll all be brought to you by our good friends at Whistle Pig. They have the barrel-aged craft cocktail in a can. It's so much better than a seltzer. It's crisp, it's refreshing, it's bold, it's flavorful. Cons is probably drinking one right now because he's not on the show, even though he made a huge commitment and came back for 3 episodes. He's once again gone.
Right.
Just doesn't have it as a priority, I guess. Sad.
Maybe he's got rabies.
Hopefully. But if you wanted to get one of these Whistle Pig ryes, they are made with 100% estate grown rye from the Whistle Pig family farm. That has fruit in the barrel too. You can try different flavors such as the fresh ginger lime, the blackberry lemon fizz, the zest of citrus mint. So many are delicious, and they're all available at 10% off if you use a promo code ZBT. Just go to cans.whistlepig.com, use the promo code ZBT22, and you are going to get 10% off, or you can pick it up in your local packy. Do you guys call it packy there? Did you say that?
Never heard that.
A packy? Nick, have
Bodega,
you heard that?
The Wawa 7-Eleven.
Have you ever heard packy?
Nope, never packy.
I
What
think
does that
packy is a
stand for?
Boston thing. I think it is. I think I heard Coley say it. I'm going down to the fucking packy. I think so. But either way, you can pick it up from your liquor store, the PX, wherever you get your booze. You can pick up some Whistle Pig cans. They're delicious.
yeah.
And if you see it, get the farm stock ale, or not the farm stock ale, get the farm stock whiskey, the rye, so many different types. It's delicious. It's my favorite. Even before we're sponsored and they're presenting partner, I did when I first started working here, that Whistle Pig was
one of your early favorites. Yeah.
It's my number one overall.
Yep.
So when we found out that Whistle Pig was going to be our presenting partner, I was stoked.
You were pumped. Yes.
I was like talking to everybody about it. I was like, this is so great. It's so wonderful. It's so wonderful.
It has been.
Let's move on to round number 1. A Southwest airline, man, taking the old Southwest airline from Seattle to Phoenix. Let's just start with the story. What do we got?
Can I say one thing? Because
Yes.
this is a story about jerking off on a plane, to put it quite eloquently.
Right.
There's a lot of places in life where I am a little horned up. Okay.
Yeah.
A little whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Never on an airplane.
Well, what about a charter bus?
That's way different, chaps. We know, but that's way different.
Why? Why do you? I don't think so. I think the plane is the charter bus of the sky, essentially. And
Charter
I think
buses are rumbling.
if you go on a church charter bus,
If you're sitting above the wheel,
somebody's getting fingered, somebody's getting their butthole fingered or jerked, their dick jerked off. Something's happening in a church, and they got those carpet seats where it's going to stay in there. You never know.
There's something mysterious and sexy about that. But a plane,
a charter bus.
I've never.
I would agree. I mean,
especially a double.
I've been married 12 years. I wouldn't mind giving it a go on a charter bus. See what Annalise is doing on the charter bus.
Right. You don't know. Plane though is different. I've never once felt horny after going through LaGuardia security. You know what I mean? Like nothing about.
Well, not LaGuardia, but what if you're back at Nashville?
Okay, that's different.
Right.
Nashville's a spicier.
Austin's got the guitar player in there.
Indianapolis, forget it. A little scoop of Amy's ice cream at Austin, and I'm all right.
No chain
You can
restaurants.
touch my boob
boy.
on the back of the plane, right?
True. Also, I need to ask you a question. I
Sure.
saw this on TikTok before we get going in here. I don't want to forget.
Mm.
So there's certain parts on the human body that you can pinch it as hard as you can and it doesn't hurt, right? Like one of those is the elbow, like the skin of your elbow. You can pinch it as hard as you want to. You could take pliers and you're not going to feel it. Another
I'm doing
one
it
is
right now.
Another one is testicle skin. You could take the skin of your testicle and pinch it as hard as possible. I don't know if that's the case for everybody, but it certainly is for me.
What?
Nick, back me up here. Is that true?
He's probably pinching his testicles right now.
Pinching his testicles right now. The
What?
mic keeps going in from mute to not. But anyway, you could pinch the nut sack real hard. I heard women can pinch their under boob as hard as they can, and you can't feel it.
Not true. No,
Still hurts.
it still hurts a little.
All right,
little
let's get going
spicy.
with round number 1.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, a man on a Southwest Airlines
Said
flight.
booger. I think we just did a little booger goofing.
I'm sick. The baby's sick. I'm
Fine.
sick.
No,
We're
yeah.
a mess.
No, let's keep going.
A man on a Southwest Airlines flight. Ew.
I know.
A man on a Southwest
Another
Airlines
one.
flight faces federal charges after allegedly masturbating at least 4 times during the flight.
At
the deal-
least 4.
I gotta tell you,
What do you think the top end number? 7?
we've all had some super bored afternoons during quarantine that we thought,
Oh, yeah.
let's see how many, you know?
Yeah. Well, not during quarantine because I was well in my 30s and on antidepressants, so that number's 1.
Oh, antidepressants. it's 1, but it's like at 2 hours of
You're like,
trying.
here we go.
And
My
then
God.
nothing at all.
There
Nobody
should
tells
be
you.
an antidepressant. There's whiskey dick. There should be a term for that. Like, big
There
time.
really nobody talks about that, but you're
They
right.
don't.
That's
Mhm.
you start fooling around with somebody, you're like after 20 minutes, you're like, I gotta tell you something. This is
I'm exhausted and on
It's a waste of
antidepressants,
time. I can't do it.
which makes you even more depressed.
It makes you more depressed.
Fucking ridiculous.
So this guy's on
Why
the
don't they
plane.
take half an antidepressant and shave some Viagra? Like put it in one of those garlic presses and just garlic press some Viagra and an antidepressant together.
Would that work?
I don't know. I don't know if ladies can take Viagra, if it makes them horny or not.
Let's get some Roman swipes.
True.
Anyway,
All right. What's happening here?
this guy's on the plane from
Right.
Seattle to Phoenix. Okay. Here's the criminal complaint that was filed. It was on Southwest Airlines flight 3814, longtime stoolie of Southwest flight 3814
Big time.
on April 2nd, 2022. Antonio Sherrod McGarity is accused of masturbating 4 times in his seat next to a female passenger. The woman took photos. When McGarity fell asleep, she told flight crew what happened. They moved her to another seat. Can I say something here?
Mhm.
Normally, I'm never one to victim shame
Mhm.
or I'm very careful about this stuff. I have to tell you, I'd like to, and everybody says what they're going to do in the moment, but you never know till you're in it. I'd really, 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 really like to think if there was a stranger sitting next to me and he started poaching the egg, shaking hands with the old milkman, polishing the banister, 5-knuckle shuffling, beating the bishop, burping the worm,
Mhm.
pretty sure I would stand up right then and there and say, excuse me, this guy's fucking flogging his molly over here.
I had
okay?
no idea that you earnestly thought that you were the masturbation Mark Wahlberg. Had no idea.
I would have stopped that.
I wish they'd
would've-
try to jerk off around me. You pull that dick out. I'm like, no, put that away.
I would have stopped his plane, his hand from crashing into that tower. You know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
probably too soon for something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Anyways, the woman then turned the photos over to Phoenix police when the flight landed. The FBI interviewed him, and he says he didn't think the passenger was uncomfortable.
Hold on. I
McGarity-
actually pulled the police report for this.
Yeah, and I summarized it, if you
Yeah.
don't mind. So
I
he's
know,
like-
but I think the way that the cops phrase it, being an FBI agent or doing something like this would be brutal. We don't have to go through the whole thing, but I just love how serious. Yeah, it is serious. Like we're joking about it.
yes,
Like I could see if you were a person there, it could be like traumatizing if somebody's jerking off to you 5 times on a plane. One time, I think you get one jerk, everybody knows the rules. That's it. Anything more
That's
than
it.
that on maybe an international flight, you can squeeze in 2, but domestic, just 1.
it's a bit much. And I'll read it exactly off the thing at the bottom where we get to the
Yeah.
pardon me, but the meat of the story
Right.
here. Okay.
Mhm.
She advised McGarity exposed his penis by pulling down his pants and shorts. So it's not even like he was hiding it, chaps. He was bare butt on the seat, had
Oh,
pulled
yeah.
all his stuff down.
Spread boo butt cheeks.
and proceeded to masturbate during the first hour of the flight, starting shortly after takeoff. He didn't even wait till the wheels came up. Okay, as soon as this bird was off the ground, he was on the pound. McGarity masturbated with his exposed penis in view of the female passenger on 4 separate occasions. I love this clarification, using both his left and right hands.
Right.
That's a flex.
Mm-hmm.
That's, what do they call those people?
Strangers. Oh, ambidextrous.
Yes. So yeah, it's a stranger when you use your hand you're not used to, right? She suspected this part. I hope nobody's eating anything creamy right now. She suspected that McGarity ejaculated because he licked a white substance from his fingers. Yeah. McGarity was interviewed by the FBI. McGarity admitted to law enforcement that he masturbated during his flight from Seattle to Arizona and that he had an orgasm. He knew this part is what
this next sentence is the reason why this story made the show. Like the next sentence.
McGarity knew the female witness sitting next to him was aware that he was masturbating and could see his, I mean, who on earth could not notice that this was happening? He's got all his pants down, dick out. And he was aware because she had her phone out and was recording it. Okay. He advised that he asked the witness, hey, basically he said, do you mind if I masturbate? According to McGarity, she put her hands in the air and said, it really doesn't matter.
Maybe she's listening to Metallica and like, nothing else matters.
Yeah.
I mean, but if that's I understand if he asked her on the first time, because I think on the first time she asked him, do you mind if I masturbate? I feel like she says no. But once you've already masturbated 3+ times, once you've done it 3 times and you're licking your fucking fingers like you're eating a goddamn chicken wing, I feel like all those concerns it doesn't matter. Like you've already jerked off 3 times on 24B.
Yeah, and he thought it was kinky. Like she's filming me. She says she doesn't mind, like that it doesn't matter. And so
mixed
she's
signals,
filming me.
big time.
I mean, sorry, but like I can see like somebody being too scared to peek up. I'm sorry. I'm gonna be like, excuse me, this guy's fucking jerking off over here. Anyway,
I don't think so. I think knowing you
think I would sit there and
yes, I do.
No way.
By yourself. I think, I mean, you'll get a $600 haircut and hate it and then tip the fucking stylist like $100.
That's different. Those are women. I want to be kind. And
okay, well, let's replace the story. Somebody's finger banging themselves on the plane, doing whatever they do a little DJ goofing, giving the old pink canoe a fucking row. I feel like if you're doing that, you don't say something either.
No.
What if she doesn't
I would
have
say
the time to do
something,
it
but
at home?
I'd be much cooler about it. I'd say, sorry, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills here. You playing the old air guitar and you're doing a DJ set on yourself? Because I'm not. You finding the Bermuda Triangle? Because I'm not cool with that. Okay.
Whoa.
You're sinking my ship right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not cool with it.
Nope.
Is what I would say.
But imagine your job. You've gone through all this education, all this training, and then you have to write on or about April 2nd, 2022, while on board Southwest Flight 3814, en route from Seattle, Washington to Phoenix, Arizona, McGarity exposed his penis and masturbated while in view of a female passenger sitting next to him.
Being in the FBI?
Yeah. I mean, having to write that kind of shit down as like a legal document has got to be, like, what are you doing? Like when she comes off, she's like, no, I can prove it. This is his dick. It's in his hand. And he was licking that stuff off of his fingers.
I'm not going to lie. I would be, if I was in the FBI, I'd be like, can I see? I'm just curious.
Yeah. Just for the record, not because I want to see what he's working with.
But aren't you a little curious?
Oh yeah. I'd be very curious. I said last night I was watching Love is Blind. And my wife looked at me like I was crazy because I said, I bet that guy has a huge ding dong. He just looked like a dude that has a big ding dong.
Sometimes you can tell.
You just can't. Like the way that he was walking and carrying himself. I'm like, that guy's got
the way somebody carries
meat
himself.
Stick. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Probably comes with cheese too. Let's move on to round number 2. What do we got for round 2?
Potatoes, my friend.
Mm.
Yeah, so slightly
Welcome
different
back
vibe.
to Potato Grenade Radio.
Yeah, everybody's all horned up now. We're gonna say, bring it back down. We're gonna bring everybody back down.
Speak to yourself.
Okay, well, true. Potato products are fantastic. Amongst hundreds of thousands of muddy spuds, a World War II era grenade was picked up on a conveyor belt at an Auckland, New Zealand potato factory.
Glad we made it to that part, the first little part of this round, without the booger scene like we had in round 1.
I didn't shoot a booger this time.
Yeah.
I know it's bad that you actually saw it over Zoom. That
Yeah, it's fine.
I gotta have me and the baby.
Like Sylvester Stallone and Cliffhanger.
Oh yeah, thank you. And what is it, Big Daddy, when the kid
Yeah.
talks? Yeah, it was rough. Anyways, the Old Mills bomb grenade, which has since been confirmed as a training grenade, did not contain explosives. It is believed to have been dug up during harvesting on a farm in Matamata. Mr. Chip's factory operation manager, Roland Spitales, said the mud-covered device was spotted on a conveyor belt full of freshly harvested potatoes in the early hours of the morning. It was initially thought to be an unusually shaped rock, but staff soon realized it was a grenade, prompting them to call the police.
This
The
is
bomb
why I
squad
wanted
came
to
out.
talk about this.
Okay.
I'm seeing it all over the place. Social media. If these old ass weapons are like crusty and corroded, stop calling the police and wasting their damn time. Like like the magnet fishers are notorious about it. They'll do their little magnet fishing. They'll bring in the string with the old magnet or whatever the fuck it's called, the rare earth magnet, super strong, and they'll bring it in. And next thing you know, they're calling the cops because they found a shotgun from 1974. And they're like, well, maybe it was done in a crime. You're not going to find anything on that when it's been in the water that long that could convict anybody anyways. Stop calling the police and wasting your time. Just throw it back into the water.
Excuse me. People are still getting fucked up from World War I and World War II bombs that they're finding, my friend.
Oh, they're not going off. No way.
Just last year, a World War II bomb exploded in Munich, injuring 4 pretty badly.
I take all that back. Be careful. Call the police immediately if you identify.
UXO from World War I could have poisonous gas in it still.
You
could unleash a little bit of that. Oh my God, no. What are the? It's insane. Anyway, back to this potatoes.
Okay.
He said this potatoes, they've been on this site for 30 years. 250 tons of potatoes every single day for 30 years. But this was the first time they ever got a grenade. It's not uncommon occurrence at European factories, given the 2 world wars we fought around there. But yeah, really, really unusual. Is that common? But it must be terrifying working at European potato factories.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, there definitely was in Japan unexploded ordnance all over the place in Okinawa in the woods. I mean, there was so bad in one area like that we used to do jungle warfare training in, and we would go and like place IEDs and things like that, like makeshift IEDs for training. But it got to be so bad out there that we couldn't tell if the dogs were false responding or actually responding, like in training environments, because sometimes like when dogs are new, they'll give a false response when there's not actually an explosive there. But out in that area, you had no idea if they were picking up residual odor from any of these explosives. So we had to stop training out there.
I was going to say that's some intense training.
Yeah.
Am I going to lose my?
You'd have to call EOD, and then it takes forever. So it's like even like the training portions, like you're sitting out there, and once you find it, you like me and the other trainers will look at each other and be like, dude, like if we know it's not dangerous out here, like we're in the middle of nowhere, but if something ever happened, we get fucking trouble because we have to log where we're at. And now we're going to have to wait out here for 2 hours, 3 hours for EOD to show up for them to kick it and say it's nothing.
Couple friendly reminders. One, to make this about me, EOD. First of all, everybody, when I was in Afghanistan, everybody loved EOD, but they always were getting shit on for taking forever. But I feel like there would only be like 2 guys for like 100 square mile radius, and they'd be getting called to like 15 calls a day. And it's not like you want them rushing, you want them taking their sweet time, doing what they got to do. But the complaint was always, you're right. Like, oh man, we got to call you. That's going to take forever, blah, blah, blah.
And when you're in combat, it's dangerous to be waiting forever. Like if you're just
because you're sitting ducks,
you're sitting ducks. Yeah.
You're sitting ducks. So it's very stressful for everyone involved. One of our EOD guys was the one who was famous for having the giant Sarah Palin tattoo on his butt cheek.
Oh,
he was a hoot. He was a real.
She
character.
actually announced that she's going to be running for Congress.
Well, somebody's prepared. They got her face on his ass. Yeah. Anyway, also, second point, I once went to the Hearst potato chip factory with pink eye that I got at an Eagles game.
Damn.
So sick brag about me. Also, I've been following these TikTokers that are finding where the old trenches were in World War I and World War II, and they go digging around. It's amazing the stuff that they find. Like, I want to go can we take a ZBT history trip and go? I'm sure they'll fly us to Europe or something.
Yeah, there's a guy in Europe too. I think it was in England who's a big World War I head, just loves the history of it. He actually built a 2-scale model of the trench and trench warfare in World War I. He built it in his backyard to make it feel exactly. And he was like a history teacher in high school. He got it approved where he could bring his students like on a bus to his house to come and do like a museum during 2020 or during COVID, where they actually got to do like a field trip.
That's when your spouse gets into a hobby and you're like, okay, they're into this hobby. And then there's a level they hit where you're like, should I be concerned?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like as long as they're not bugging you, you can watch your shows.
Yeah, because being like a train set guy, it goes from being great
escalates
to being what the fuck is going on here.
Like, I feel like once your partner starts spending your vacation money on this shit, then it's like, okay.
If they're wearing like specialized glasses that they have to flip down because it's so intricate, like, and you come in there, imagine how I don't know if there's a greater turnoff in the world than walking into an attic and seeing some dude wearing overalls and a train conductor hat placing fake grass into the side of a mountainside.
They're going to put one of those guys on every Southwest Airlines flight now.
Oh, yeah. That should be
nobody
the punishment.
Masturbates.
You jerk off on a plane, you're a train guy.
You're for sure. Yeah.
Maybe that's what happened to Zaw. Because he's a conductor.
Oh, he's a conductor. I was like, did he masturbate on a train?
I mean, I wouldn't put it past him.
Oh, true. He's a wild card.
He absolutely is. All right, so that's what happened. There's a fake potato or a fake grenade that turned into a potato. Round number 3 is going to be brought to you by our good friends at Roman. If you stink in bed, if you are awful at it, that one's from the Roman ad read. I was shocked. That's the reason why I read it. I was like, I wouldn't normally say that if you suck in bed. What if you're just on antidepressants? Imagine how bad you're already depressed, and then somebody's like, your dick sucks.
Well, the Roman's there to help you then. Thank God.
Yeah, if your dick sucks, get Roman because they're going to help you last longer in bed. They have a clinically proven way to last longer in bed. They're effective, easy to use, and fast acting, and they don't require a prescription. Roman can send you swipe to in a discreet, unmarked package, and each swipe is small enough to fit in your wallet or your current voice. God damn it. Corn purse. They're super easy to use. Yeah, boys. They're super easy to use. Just swipe them out of the packet, swipe it on and let it dry, and you're good to go. That's it.
For your birthday, he's a corn purse.
If you're going to jerk off in a plane, make it last longer. So you only have to do it once and not 4 times with Roman. Get roman.com/ZBT to get your first month of swipes for just $5 when you choose a monthly plan. That's getroman.com/ZBT. All right, let's move on to round number 3. This one, I feel like we've been praising the National Guard over and over again. And then the next thing you know, they're going after American Icon.
They're going after a big time American Icon. And I got to tell you, as somebody who has a mom who only drinks Bud Heavies, Budweiser, it's pretty difficult to read this story. She's going to be so upset. She does love the Whistle Pig
Session Citrus Mint too.
Well, actually, so she like Budweiser. I love coming down and bringing new things for her to try. And so I actually brought a little I'm down at my parents right now because we got rejected. It's a long story. We got rejected from daycare today because he's sick and Pat's traveling. So I had nowhere to go. And so I came down here. Anyway, I brought some Whistle Pig for my mom to try. I love having her try this stuff. But an Ohio, and of course it was Ohio, the Florida, the North. An Ohio National Guardsman apparently must really hate Budweiser since he was arrested this week for allegedly threatening on social media to crash a stolen plane into an Anheuser-Busch plant that produces Bud and other famous beers like Michelob, Natty Light, and Rolling Rock. Specialist James Ricky Mead II. That's a guy causing trouble. James Ricky Mead II.
I think you gotta quit. If his middle name is Ricky, he had no choice. None. If it's legally Ricky, what can you do?
This is his legal name. It's not like Richard and he shortened it. His middle name is Ricky, and there's no hope.
No shot.
If you have someone in your unit right now and the middle name is Ricky, you might just NJP him right now, is what
honestly,
I say.
If your middle name is Ricky and you're listening to this podcast, send me a picture of your ID. You get all the other information can be blocked out. If it's actually Ricky, I'll send you $50. I mean, I
Yeah.
just feel like you just need it. You need something good
You
to
need
happen.
money, but you're probably gonna buy spice with it though.
You probably are.
Yeah. Specialist James Ricky Mead II.
Oh, God, Ricky.
Oof, classic. An air defense battle management system operator with the 2nd Battalion, 174th Air Defense Arty Regiment, was charged with making a terrorist threat after a woman spotted Mead's social media post and alerted the police. This is from the Columbus Dispatch, which reported the news this week. The 26-year-old Mead posted about wanting to steal a plane and crash it into the Columbus plant back in December. I hope they got a terrorism insurance plan the day before, Mead allegedly wrote on Discord, a social media app.
How could you possibly be
Is there a
that
terror?
stupid? Like that is you're an aggressively dumb person in 2022 if you're writing threats like that online. Just aggressively dumb.
Just so blatant.
That's a Ricky move.
Not even a hidden threat. It's straight up. I hope they got a terrorism insurance plan the day before because I'm going to smash my fucking plane into this. But Mead was arrested at his home about 90 miles southeast of Columbus on Monday by members of the Ohio Highway Patrol and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, of who we have an interview with coming up here, somebody from the ATF, which they have to just see the craziest shit. Alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and explosives. That has to be the most fascinating of like.
You spent
FBI,
a lot of time
CIA,
in trailer parks. A lot of time.
A lot of time. What do we think? Yeah, I'm not gonna shame. But what?
No, we're not gonna shame. But I think you gotta call it out here. I mean, if you're gonna be cooking meth, typically you're gonna be doing it in a spot that's disposable.
I'm gonna say James Ricky Mead had several appliances on his lawn.
Mead is his last name too. Oh my God, he's already boozing up. Unbelievable.
It's tough. And by the way, Mead is the 2nd member of the same unit to be arrested for allegedly making terroristic threats just in the past week.
They need a safety brief. They got to update it.
They got to update it. On March 30th, Corporal Thomas Devlin was charged, and this one is actually very serious and very fucked up and upsetting. Corporal Thomas Devlin was charged with making threats against the Columbus Torah Academy, a private Jewish school for kindergartners through 12th grade. Devlin reportedly worked as a security guard there and had allegedly made threats against students and parents. He wrote, "The playground is about to turn into a self-defense situation," the 24 posted on Discord, along with photos of him holding a handgun. And this guy's guarding the school full of children. Mead had also peddled in anti-Semitic tropes and spread hate online. So the two of these guys, both enormous pieces of shit.
News agencies use terminology like that? He peddled in fucking anti-Semitic, like he dabbled in being an anti-Semite.
Yeah, he was they wrote, the Columbus Dispatch wrote, he was dipping his toe in the piggy pond of racism. Piggy dipping at the
he goes salt bathed with a little bit of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, he was just a scotch racist. So basically both these guys, huge pieces of shit, both still members of the Ohio Army National Guard, but their security clearances and any promotions or transfers have been suspended. So they are still members of the Guard.
Not for long. I mean, they'll get booted out for sure. But good Lord, man. Like, I just don't understand how you get to that spot. The people, Ricky, that's all you got to really say. Like, just Ricky. All right, let's move on to your interview.
Now on Zero Block 30, we are joined by Ken Croke of the book Riding with Evil, which has been described as Sons of Anarchy meets The Departed. He is the first ATF agent to infiltrate the Pagan Motorcycle gang. No big deal. And this whole story, so the book just came out, and this whole story is just, I'm trying to imagine, I can't fake anything. I'm an open book. You can see on my face, I give away every emotion that I'm feeling. How you go undercover long-term with a motorcycle gang and quite honestly live to tell the tale about it is incredible. So you started off in Los Angeles in the 90s, street gangs, busting drug rings. How did it evolve to this?
So when I was, and you're right, so I'm originally from Boston, but my first assignment, I was sent to LA, and
He'll fit right in there. Boston guy will fit right in. Nobody will know. Yeah,
not hard to explain a Boston accent when you're going everywhere. But I actually went through some training to get the accent dropped. But I will say, but give me a couple pints of Guinness in the accents right back at you. But anyhow, I always felt like, people kind of stereotyped like, oh, you'd have to be minority or female or this or that to do these different roles. And I think there's some truth to that, but for the most part, it's really what your backstory is and what your introduction is going to be. And I did a lot of undercover work with gangs, African-American gangs, Hispanic gangs, white gangs, in my time in LA. And it was, I'm a white guy. And, back then I had a long ponytail, long hair. Now I have no hair. And maybe that's because of the work, but it's, really just, it's how the intro is, and then how quickly you can think on your feet, and because you could script out all day long, like, oh, I'm going to go in, I'm going to say A, B, and C, and as soon as the first conversation starts, it runs off in a different direction. You just have to be able to adapt quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, we just have covered a couple recent big stolen valor stories in the Marine Corps, well, like in the military world, and it's people who they took the time to step back and learn the culture really well before they started dipping their toes in and like picking up pieces here and there. And then next thing you knew, like nobody, one of the women that we were talking about, she became the leader of her local VFW. She had all these major roles and nobody had a clue. She was so good at it. She had all these, and these were actual veterans, military veterans that she had entrenched herself in, and none of them were the wiser. So, if you pick up on enough of the culture, I guess, of any community, is that what it was like?
I think that's actually a great analogy. If you, for me, it was because I wasn't really raised in that inner city type environment or with gangs for sure. And when you talk to them and you listen to them and you debrief them, at some point you'll start to understand what that world is and what makes it work. And so you can, as long as you're not trying to, I'm not going to be able to say I'm a shoreline crip. I mean, I'm not going to be able to play that. But if I'm playing somebody who may do business with the shoreline crips and I'm comfortable in that role, and then you could fit in. And
what made you, was it the ATF that told you this is the route you're going, or did you volunteer to do this?
So, part of it, so the ATF does not make anybody do undercovers. So that's the first, other than when you're in the academy. When you're in the academy, you have to try it, but it's in a safe environment, you're in the academy. But when I came out, I always just felt like certain folks got stereotyped into doing this. And so my wife's a Hispanic female, and she was an agent, and she was put into undercover assignments, based on her race. And I always felt like that wasn't fair. And I also felt like there's other ways you could do it. And so I kind of took that on as a challenge, and, found out I was pretty good at it and developed, in early parts of my career. And I like the challenge. And, quick story. The first undercover op I had done out in Los Angeles, it was actually for stolen explosives from a military base out by Barstool. And I got out there and had done a few, ops back to back. And I was like, this is great. You had this adrenaline high. And I remember driving back to my apartment in LA, and I stopped and picked up some burgers along the way. Got in my apartment, sat on the couch, put the burgers on the floor, sat back for a second, and woke up 4 hours later from the adrenaline crash. The burger's stone cold. Wow. And that's when I realized like the stress that you actually are under when you do this, even if you don't feel it when you're doing it.
Yeah. And I imagine that's something kind of like a high you want to keep chasing. Like it's that exciting. I mean, I know that's incredibly stressful, but it's also so exciting outside everyday life that you probably you want to keep chasing that sort of like.
Well, I think it was the challenge of it. And every role is different. And when I was in California, that was my first real exposure to outlaw motorcycle gangs. Yeah. And so I'd done some work on the Mongols and on the Vagos. And so I, had some, interest in doing that. And I did a lot of white supremacy work out in LA in the deserts, and then out in Colorado and out to Kansas. So one thing led to another, and had some of these roles and always found it a challenge and was always willing to do it. And, I think the more you do it, the better you get at it. And then the more people want you to do it. Right. Because everyone's got their cases and they're not going to do the undercover, or they don't have the skill set to do it. And so they'd be like, hey, Ken, could you come over and do this? And a lot of it's quick, you might do 1 or 2 buys. Right. Most of them aren't 2-year assignments.
And that's what this turned into for you with the Pagans. So eventually you move on to Colorado, and that's where you get more involved. How did the Pagans specifically come into it?
So the Pagans were when I was in Boston, and in the case, again, people always like, oh, how did you ever commit to doing a 2-year assignment? Well, it was never supposed to be a 2-year assignment. I never signed up for a 2-year assignment. It turned into that. And the way it started is an informant had come in to one of the groups in Boston with some information and that he had on the Devil's Disciples, which is kind of a support club for the Pagans. Yeah, the big clubs have a bunch of support clubs that are aligned with them. And so they came in or this informant had come in and provided some info. They came and vetted off me because I had more biker experience than anyone else in the division. So we talked it through and put him on the polygraph. He passed the polygraph. And so I was like, I'll go with him to meet some of these guys just to see what this is about, see if it's worth, running an investigation on. But the one thing I needed to do was meet his wife. Because my story with him was going to be that we knew each other from the Beach Street projects in Rosendale. And if I had known him for years, then his wife would obviously know me. And so I want to make sure she could stand up to the background and if she got questioned about me. And so went and met with her. She was actually more squared away than he was. And so I felt comfortable that, at least short term it could work. And during that encounter with her, very shortly after, there was issues in a hot water heater. And it was, long story short, is I met, but just by happenstance, one of the Devil's Disciples, helped him fix his hot water heater. And that led to an invitation to a party, and went to the party, met a bunch of other Devil's Disciples, and it went from there. And at some point, not too far down the road, because the intent was that I would go meet some of these and then bring somebody and introduce them and let them do the long term. But it went so fast, and way faster than we had planned on.
So you fix his water heater, you get invited to this party, and things start happening really, really quickly. This is a stupid question. Did you already ride motorcycles at this point? Like, did you already have a thing for them, or you had to develop that really fast on the fly?
No, that's not a stupid question. And yes, I had been riding motorcycles ever since I was a kid.
Okay.
Dirt bikes.
It's not like,
bikes.
All right, Ken, hop on. You're like, oh shit, I don't. Yeah.
I will tell you a side story, and I won't say who it was, but there was an agent who, was going on an infiltration on a biker gang, never ridden a bike, and he literally he tipped over on his first escapades out. So, and you could build that into your story. You can make your story part of anything. Yeah. But no, I was familiar with bikes. I had done a fair amount of riding, not at the level that these guys rode, or at the speeds or on the formations, but yeah, I had done a fair amount of riding.
So you go to this party though, and you start meeting other people. Things are moving quickly, and this was just somebody from one of the side groups you had met. How did you link up with the main group, and when did you start to? Because it's a big deal. It takes a while, really, to gain their trust, right? How did you do that?
Yeah, so it was never supposed to be me. I was going to be there, and I was going to bring somebody in for that intro. But then all of a sudden, really quickly after this, there was two individuals, Boston Bob and an individual known as Billy Jacobson, and these two were kind of vying, and they were openly talking about, we are starting a Pagan chapter in Boston. And both had told me separately that they were going to be the presidents of this chapter. And I was like, yeah, sure. So we would go to a bar down in South Boston and meet up. So I was building a relationship with him. And then Boston Bob, I'd meet with a bar out in Western Mass, and I was building a relationship with him. Anyways, fast forward, they were going down. So a Pagan prospect was murdered, and they had an event for him. Now, the Pagan prospect being murdered did not help my odds of ATF, endorsing me becoming the next prospect for to replace the murdered one. But this event was going to happen down there. It was a two-day event. So the two of them were going down on Friday night, and I was going to meet them down there on Saturday night. And that was going to be my first time meeting the Pagans down in New York. They go down to a bar called Mobo's on Long Island. And when they're there, and I heard about this before from Boston Bob, that Billy had been hooking up with this female down in New York. And he had been warned by Boston Bob, like, hey, she's affiliated with the Pagans. You do not want to be messing around with this girl. This is going to come back. It's going to bite you. Like, this it's a mistake. And Billy's like, yeah, whatever. He kind of blew him off. Anyways, long story short, they show up at this bar. When they walk in, this female sees him before he sees her, and she points out to her new boyfriend, who happens to be a president of one of the Pagan chapters, and says, see that guy over there? He raped me. Now, maybe he did rape her. Maybe he did. I don't know. I never was able to get to the back part of it. And you'll hear why in a second. So 4 pagans lure him into the bathroom, which is the bathroom. Sounds like, why would you go in the bathroom? It's like, going behind where they hide chainsaws in a horror movie. But that's where these biker clubs do a lot of their activity, and they're controlled bars. The bathroom is either where they're using drugs, selling drugs, doing whatever transactions. So it wasn't abnormal. And he's thinking, hey, I'm going in here. They're going to name me the president of the new chapter, blah, blah, blah. So he walks through the door closes, and they beat the crap out of him. They beat him unconscious. He wakes up, and all 4 of them are urinating on him. And the urine's actually what wakes him up. They then beat him unconscious again. And then they bring Boston Bob into the bathroom, and they say, hey, take Billy, get him back to the motel. We're going to come back there. We're going to cut his dick up, and we're going to throw him in a dumpster. And so Boston Bob's like, okay, I got you. Because Boston Bob's thinking, I'm next, because he doesn't know the full story and what's happened.
Right.
So he takes him out of there. And as he gets him in his car, he's soaked in urine and semi-conscious. It all of a sudden dawns on him like, hey, I left Boston with this guy. If I don't come back with this guy and they find him in a dumpster, it's coming back on me. So he wisely decides, okay, it's time to leave New York. He drives all the way back to Boston, pushes Billy out of the car in front of the Somerville Hospital, and drives off. And then I get a text at like 4:30 in the morning, and it says, and it's from Boston Bob, trips off, I'll explain later. So I try to call him, I don't get anything. I'm trying to call Billy, I'm not getting anything. Eventually I do get one call from Billy. It was very short. And he said, get out. You don't want to be around these guys. Get out while you can. And he's like, you're never going to hear from me again. Hang up. Never heard from him again. And that was it. He was gone. So I never really got the full story because he was out of the case.
Yeah. So that's a great intro to the pagans. I mean, really the insanity that is, rough first day. But, and 2, before we get too far into this, what sets the pagans apart? Because I'm like, oh, a pagan is a Hell's Angel, is a Mongol, is a whatever. Like they're all the same, really. What sets them apart from other gangs?
So they all kind of have their own. They all kind of have their own personalities. The clubs, they're out of the big 5. But by far, so the pagans last year were reported. When they do those intelligence reports in law enforcement, they were the most violent of the big 5 gangs. And I haven't looked at the last few years' reports. I just happened to look at the last year's, but I'm betting they are almost every year. They're different from other gangs where when they do their mandatories, they're sleeping in dirt fields. They're
mandatory is, it's kind of like in the military getting called to formation, like you better be there kind of thing.
That's perfectly analogy. You have to be there unless you're physically unable to be there. So if there's a mandatory and they'll say, okay, like one of them was in Youngstown, Ohio. Every pagan from everywhere had to be in Youngstown, Ohio over this 4-day weekend, and you had no choice. And so like they when they go to these things, they're sleeping in dirt fields. There's a lot, drugs, fights, but there's also a lot of gang activity, like planning for Mother Club, which is the national hierarchy that runs the entire gang, and then there's chapters that make up the the subsets. And so now other gangs, they're staying in 5-star hotels. They're staying or motels at least where there's running water. And these guys aren't into the money. They're into the violence, the intimidation. That's their thing.
So that's probably part of the allure, is how down and dirty it is sleeping in the fields and being like, oh, that makes us tougher than all the others.
100%. And it's also, they were known to trafficking firearms and explosives. And I bought bombs, I bought guns, and they were violent. They would blow people up. They would kill people. And so that was part of why this gang was one, and they're very surveillance conscious. They had never been infiltrated by law enforcement. That was their claim to fame until I came along. And there's a reason for it, because you can't get to the hierarchy from the outside. They're very insulated. And by getting in and then moving up, I actually became an officer within the club. By doing that, we were able to get to some of that hierarchy.
And so what year was this? So now you were working gangs in LA with the ATF, you make your way to Boston, you get this intro, you have an in to start making your way, and you're sort of a recruit. You're not fully even a pagan yet. So they have you doing all these different tasks for them that I'm assuming were highly illegal a lot of times, right?
So the basic phases, you have the hang around phase, which is almost like a honeymoon phase where you get to go to their parties. There's no stress on anything. You don't have to do anything. They're just having you around, but they're sizing you up that entire time.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get past that, then they're going to put you in the prospect phase. That is living hell.
Okay.
You belong to the group. You're basically a slave. 24/7, you're called to do all sorts of different things, but you're not in the inner workings. You're not part of their criminal activity. You are not in on the meetings where they're doing that. And you are constantly under mental duress or physical duress or both. And you don't even belong to a chapter. You belong to the entire organization. So basically anybody who wants to screw with you is going to screw with you. So one example, at those mandatories, they would have what they call the witching hour. And about 2:00 in the morning, they had these strung out pagans that would just go on the hunt for prospects, and they would just beat them. And their weapon of choice was axe handles. And people are often like, oh, an axe handle, that's not that big of a deal. An axe handle is a baseball bat. There's like, these are real axe handles. They're not like the little one for a little machete. And they would beat these, beat prospects regularly. And if you break certain rules, if you do certain things out of sight, you're going to get beaten or thrown out or both. And if you can get through the prospect phase, which is a minimum of 6 months, then you would become a patch. And so then you're a patch, and then you can go into officer status, depending on how long you last.
And what were some of the most difficult parts of the prospect phase for you? Probably getting beaten with an axe handle, Kate.
The beating of the I had somebody, so they have rules. They don't follow them very well, but they have rules. So they're not supposed to steal from prospects.
Right.
They'll treat, it's a mental, like, they'll physically, I would go to mandatory, and one mandatory, my feet were just bleeding. I had to walk the perimeter. And, I slept maybe an hour in 4 days. You didn't really eat. I lost 8 pounds over that time. And you're either on patrol, you're picking up trash, you're cooking, building tents, and then you're hiding out during witching hours. But this one instance, I was coming up, I was in Pennsylvania, and I was coming up a path. I had been sent up to the upper field to get something. And there's a group of pagans that were hanging out there, and they made, one of them said, "Hey, prospect, come over here." And, it's not, they're not asking. And so you go walking over, and I had been doing some stuff. So my chain was hanging out of my t-shirt, which was underneath my prospect vest. And he said, "Hey, let me see that." So I kind of held it up and showed him the chain from a distance. I knew where this was going. And he's like, "No." I said, "I want to see it, take it off." And I'm like, "It's not going to happen." And I had gotten this chain, before I got, went on with ATF. My mother had given it to me. And it was a crucifix with a Irish shamrock for protection.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked so far, so I wasn't about to give it up. And so somebody else said, "You heard what he said," And so this guy came at me. I knew it was going to be on. So I ended up getting him onto the ground, but then the rest of them came, and I just, I got beaten with axe handles and everything else. And luckily for me, one of the presidents happened to come up the same path. And he's like, "Hey," he basically broke it up. He's like, "What the hell's going on here?" And so, of course, I didn't say anything. I wasn't going to rat anybody out. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and they're like, "Oh, it was a misunderstanding. It was this, that." And it kind of broke up. They never got the chain. I was banged up pretty good, but nothing that I wasn't going to heal from. So, that's just kind of the stuff that you went through. And then in the prospecting stage, if you screwed up, you could get, the lifts thing was a bang check. So it's basically a palm strike to the head,
Mm-hmm.
or you get a axe handle, or you could get days added. And honestly, I don't know what's worse, the bang check to the head or get days added to prospecting,
Right.
or you can get beaten and thrown out. And so they would come up to you and regularly ask you how many days, or they'd ask you about the history of the club, or they'd ask you all sorts of crazy things. And if you didn't have an answer they liked, or sometimes they would just put you in a situation where you could win. You're like, "You're not supposed to touch anything that says pagans." And I had a pagan throw colors at me.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't let colors hit the ground. So what do? You
Matrix
can't touch it, but you can't let it hit the ground. So you're screwed, and they're setting you up, just for those.
So this is basically like Marine Corps boot camp, but in hell. But the most nightmarish possible version. Everyone's playing, we call them fuck games, but you're stuck in these fuck games. You're fucked either way. There's no winning. Pardon the language, but pardon the language, she said to the former pagan. But you may have heard it all.
There was, this is their term for their wives or girlfriends, they're old ladies. One of the old ladies said, "Hey, all they are is evil Boy Scouts, and they because they have all the patches and all these things mean something, and their colors are most important to them. And you know, right now, a set of Pagan's colors, a Hell's Angel will pay $10,000 for them. Like they're worth a lot for. And they told me when I was prospecting, I had a Mother Club member come up, said, "You kill a Hell's Angel and bring me his colors, your prospecting ends today."
Wow. Holy shit. And so you're doing this. Meanwhile, you're checking in with the ATF, who I'm assuming they wanted to know everything. So like you had to probably tell them that night that you got in that fight and, you know, you're whatever. At any point, did you have to keep convincing them, let me keep going? Or were they like, you're crushing it, I know this sucks, but keep going?
So it was a little bit of both. I will say this, there was 99% of what I, happened, I would tell them. I did not tell them about that being the case agent. Some others knew about it, but I didn't, it didn't go in the report because it would give some folks reasons. Cause there was an internal battle. There were some that,
I'm
sure. Everyone was like, oh, hey, do this. We want you to do this and go ahead in. And then all of a sudden it starts getting a little bit dicey. And there's a couple of folks who are more worried about their careers than they were about, my safety or the case. Mm-hmm. And they were like, we got to shut this down because this will look bad if he gets killed. Right. And so it was a constant battle that went on during that. Now, 99% of the folks in ATF are awesome and we're super supportive. But you always have that one or two, and you saw it in the military. It's like, hey, you better not screw up my advancement up the food chain.
Oh yeah. So many parallels here. But so you make it through though. You make it through as a prospect. And we talk about, I'm going to keep using the parallels because it's so striking to me. But again, not slightly worse version with the Pagans, much more good vibes on the Marine Corps side. But the day that we get our EGAs at the end of boot camp is one of the proudest. It doesn't matter how tough you are. You have a tear streaming down your face and you feel like you're part of something. It's such an incredible feeling. What was, I want to call it your pinning, but it's you get your badge. What was it like when you find your patch? Call it
being patched in. So being patched in was an interesting story. So you never know when that's coming, right? It's not like 6 months and all of a sudden you look at your watch and you're like, oh, I made it. It's not like that. It's very vague. And so the church is where they do all their criminal planning. And so you have church. Yeah, they call it church.
Yeah.
And it's once a week and it's done by the chapter and you have to be there. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes church, no electronics are allowed in church. There were times that we would have to be stripped down naked and we'd be sitting there having these conversations. They always had an RF detector where they were wanting you for a wire or transmitter. So very secretive and when those sessions were held. So sometimes prospects were allowed in, sometimes they weren't. So I was a prospect in this particular church session. I was allowed in. So we were in there and talking through a bunch of stuff. Church ended and they handed me a bunch of documents that we had created during church. And they wanted me to burn them in the grill out behind the president's house. So I walked out and I had these documents and a lighter and I went to the grill and one of the Pagans followed me out, Izzo. And he's there and he's just bullshitting with me at the grill. I like the documents on fire, but it's almost like he's watching me, but whatever. So I burn the documents. They're almost done. And I hear, hey, prospect. And usually when it was just the chapter, they wouldn't call me prospect. When you were in the big environments where it was the big club, it was always prospect this, prospect that, but they would call me Ken. And so I turned back and the sergeant at arms and the national and the chapter president were standing in the doorway. They're like, get back in here. So I go walking towards the door and it just seemed like a weird vibe. Mm-hmm. And so I'm walking towards the door and I go up and there's like a mud room to a kitchen to a living room. And as I get to the kitchen piece, Izzo's right behind me, like in my space, like right behind me. And out of the corner of my eye, I can see he's got a handgun in his hand, and which is really unusual. That's not normal for just when the chapters, especially at church. And so as I go into the living room, there's a pagan known as Hogman. And, in the book, Hogman is one of the most vile individuals.
Sounds like
he had a blood fetish. I won't get into all. He had a blood fetish. He was just a nasty human being. But he's sitting there with a shotgun and he's got it pointed at my head. And so now I got Izzo and I can feel his breath in the back of my neck. I can see the chrome handgun. I got Hogman with a shotgun pointed at me. And the sergeant at arms hands me this paper and he says, read it. So I'm reading it to myself and he's like, listen, idiot, read it out loud. And so I start reading it and it's about being a rat or an informant. And I'm like, holy shit, they figured it out. They know. And I'm like, how the hell am I going to get out of this? And I don't have a transmitter. The cover team, which is miles away anyways, but they're never going to get there. So there was a plate glass window in the living room. I'm like, no matter what happens here, I'm getting through that plate glass window, at least so somebody will know. So I'm reading through this thing, and then he makes me read it again, and I'm like, and it's getting heated. He's like yelling, and I'm like, I can't figure out, like, in my head, I'm like, how did they figure it out from the beginning of church to the end of church? Anyways, long story short, the chapter president walks down the hallway, comes back, corner of my eye, he throws something at my head. And so just instinctively, I duck and put my hands up, and it hits it, and I end up catching it. It's a rolled up t-shirt. Mm-hmm. And so I unroll the t-shirt, and it's what they call a soft patch, which is basically the pagan colors on a t-shirt. Mm-hmm. And the fact that he gave that told me that, hey, you got patched in, you made it. And then the big congratulations and all this stuff.
Your mom and dad come out. There's cake and
they get to come down and take a photo.
Yeah, it's really your grandma's there. It's very sweet. Yeah.
Honestly, I was like, hey, I don't give a rat's ass about this t-shirt. I'm just glad I'm going to be able to walk out of this place right now.
Yeah, and from a human aspect of it, you had to have been fucking pumped, right? Like, you made it. Like, this is like the bad guys, but didn't you feel some sort of like?
So, I will say it probably took about 15 minutes. Church ended. I had one of the pagans come up and was like, if you turn out to be a rat, we're going to kill you. Yeah. And, so
that'll put a damper on it.
Yeah. But then I got in a car with the Sergeant at Arms, and we were driving to grab a coffee, and it kind of hit me. I was like, holy cow, I'm the first one who's ever done this. And also I was like, and this was falsely, I was like, life is going to get so much better. I'm now a patch member. I can move, around without being under the gun all the time, and, whatever. The fact is, though, it's not, because you're always beholden to the gang. There's always people over you. There's always demands on you. Even when I went into officer status, there's still mother clubs above you. Like, there's always something. So, but at the time, it made me feel better.
Yeah. And so now that you're in, is it a full-time job, or do these guys have like regular day jobs and then at night they're pagans, or is it a full-time gig?
So it depends as far as the job part. Some have jobs. I mean, there was one pagan who worked on Wall Street. He did a lot of the money laundering and set up the LLCs and all that stuff. Most of, I would say, 25% maybe had real jobs. Mm-hmm. And then the rest were, making the money off of drugs or extortions or whatever it was. You had they were pretty good about if you're slinging hamburgers at McDonald's, they weren't going to, have you leave mid-shift. Mm-hmm. Unless something drastic was happening. And so, there was that kind of dynamic. And
so I'm assuming you didn't have too much free time, that this kind of took over your whole entire life. Did they have you doing illegal things? And then if you got caught, because you did get arrested and spend time in jail at one point, correct? How did that work?
I did. And so I had authorization from the director of ATF in the U.S. Attorney's Office to participate in what they call tier 1 and tier 2 crimes. So mm-hmm. I could be involved in criminal activity, and you just have to report on it. And now I couldn't go out and kill somebody or something like that, but you could, criminal activity where people weren't going to get hurt, or you could do drug trafficking, arms trafficking, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And so but they were all, even when you thought you were going to have downtime, something came up and you were beholden to the club and you had to be there. And so you never really got to relax. And even when I was able, so part of my backstory was that I worked at a garage mm-hmm. As a mechanic. And then the other part was that I poached lobsters. And the reason why I picked that was, and I'll tell you a funny side story, is you can hypnotize lobsters. If you rub them behind their eyes, you can actually get them into a catatonic state. And so I early on brought down some lobsters from Mass. And I was at an event at the chapter president's house, and I hypnotized a bunch of them standing up in the bar. And that's it. They were like, shit, this guy's got to be a lobster man, because who the hell else can hypnotize a lobster? So that poaching the lobsters was the one way that I could say, hey, I'm going out poaching. And they couldn't track me.
Right.
My wife would tell me, she'd be like, listen, even when you're here, you're not here. Because the phone would ring, or worse yet, I was always wondering what's happening, because it was almost worse when you disengaged and had to re-engage than being there, because you could see how things develop when you're there. And when you come back, it's okay, what's changed? So it was never really a relaxation piece.
And I assume you really had to be working at that mechanic's garage, correct?
So I had a lot of backstopping in there. There was photos of me in there. There were folks there and they actually, the Pagans went and did surveillance. And showed up at the garage.
Right.
And, luckily it passed. The backstopping piece of this is it's not an exact science and you do your best. But like when I got arrested, I had a criminal history. I was a convicted felon, and the felony I chose was a bad choice. I chose that for assaulting a police officer. But I figured that looked great to bikers, right? Didn't look so good to the cops when I got arrested, though.
Right.
But so it's like if I had to do it again, I'd pick differently. But even that, when you hoping that your backstory stands up. And so on that, and you alluded to before, there was a bunch of out-of-town pagans were out on Rocky Point. And they were talking about going after Hell's Angels Clubhouse and doing a bunch of stuff. So we brought some gang units in to heat up the area. Now the gang units, none of the locals knew that there was an undercover, but we just said, hey, we got some intel, whatever. So they come out and heated it up, and it was good because it quieted down the area. And I thought they'd all left, and I was hungry. I wanted to go get something to eat. Didn't want to leave. I had a gun, and I didn't want to leave it in the clubhouse because for fear the cops would come back and these guys would use it. And they had other guns there, but I want to add one more to it. And I didn't want to walk down the street with it in case I got jacked up. I'd have a gun on. Cruiser comes whipping up. Next thing I'm proned out. Long story short, they searched the truck, got the gun, and so I got locked up. And not part of the plan. It added some street cred, but it created a lot of problems for us.
Because they don't want you under scrutiny anyway, right? Like that's another part of it, I'm sure. But
and their rule is they have lots of rules, and the rule is that if you're arrested until your case is cleared, you're supposed to disengage from the club.
You're on your own, right?
Because that's where rats come from. So they were like, but for me, they made an exception, and they're like, hey, other than we're gonna let slam. And there's a church video like this. I actually got video of church. And in that they talk about the fact that they made me an officer. You're supposed to be in the club a year before you can even think about being an officer. They made me an officer quicker. And then they used me as an example. They said, hey, Slam's doing a great job, but nobody else is if you got a case, you're gone until your case is resolved. If you're new into the club, you're not going to be an officer. So they broke the rules for me. And I think they probably lived to regret it later on.
Oh, I'm sure. Now, at the time, I was talking about, did you feel excited when you got welcomed into the group? Was there a time you ever felt yourself kind of slipping into an affection for some of these guys? What did it become difficult because you went so far into it? You were in it for years that you started to be like, hey, checking in with yourself, not fall too far into it, or?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I liked some more than others. But no, I never, most of the time you're living at your brain is working at such a high level in activity. And I say that not because, I'm smart or anything like that. It's about when, you brought up at the beginning, like telling lies. So, and I always use this analogy to explain it to people. Like if I asked you, make up a lie to me and tell me about where you went to dinner last night, what you had, who you were with, what you were wearing, and how was the meal prepared? You could sling that out and I'd buy it, whatever it is. But then I'm going to come back a week from now and I'm going to say, how was that steak cooked that you had last week? That's really hard to do because it's not an ingrained memory. It's not a real memory. It's a memory of a lie. So, when you're doing this, at some point you do get fatigued, and the way out is to take the case down. And for me, some of the frustration got to be like, we had targeted times. It was never supposed to be 2 years, and we were going to take it down after 1 year. And then it was a year and 3 months and a year and 6 months. And it kept getting put off. And that got to be frustrating because you wanted out, but you couldn't because there were certain things that were happening that you had to stay in for.
Right. And you were married during this time too, I heard you say. Because are you allowed to say what's going on to your partner, or is it so undercover? And I would think about the stress and the worry on my end that I would be feeling every time you walked out the door. That had to take a huge toll on your personal life.
So my wife was an agent also.
Yeah.
And so that made it good because she knew what was going on.
She could understand.
Right. But it made it bad because she understood.
Right.
So it was a mixed bag. And we had 3 daughters and they were younger at the time. And so, she's an agent, and she's, basically running the household. So it put a lot on her, and she kept a lot from me because she knew like I was overloaded with what was going on. She wanted me to focus on what I was doing. So there was that dynamic, and it certainly puts a lot of stress on a marriage. Like, no marriage counselor is going to tell you, hey, you should go undercover for 2 years. It's going to strengthen your relationship. And so over time, there was, times that you just kind of, the family moves on without you. And so it's like their lives are happening. And even, like I said, the interaction's not as genuine because you're not really there. And so next thing you know, you're like, wait, when did that happen? And they're like, well, 4 months ago. Now there were some upsides. There was, my oldest had her first boyfriend. This is like when they're dating, like, you play and shooting hoops in the driveway type thing. And so I was able to sneak away, and my family didn't know I was coming home. And I was coming into our neighborhood, which is a quiet suburban neighborhood, on my bike. And I just been on a mandatory, and I was full leathers. I didn't have my colors on, but I hadn't showered in days, so I looked really bad. And my daughter knew the sound of the bike, and so we had a long driveway, and she's running down the driveway as I come around the corner and pull in. And so I, shut the bike off, jump off, give her a big hug, and she's all excited that I'm there. And then I look up and I see this kid, and his eyes are the size of footballs. And he's like, holy shit, that's your father.
Who the hell is this guy?
Yeah. And like, he didn't know, he was trembling when I tried to like de-escalate the whole thing, tried to shake his hand. I think I made it worse. And needless to say, within 24 hours, he was gone.
He was an ex-boyfriend. Yeah. It was a little too much for the, and then, so finally though, like you said, you were kind of hoping like, let's draw this case to an end. You finally draw it to an end. What had you been hoping you would get out of this case? What was the goal, and what did you end up accomplishing?
So, the whole way through it, you're building, like, again, you could script out and say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. But, the cards are dealt to you daily as you go on. But the one thing I said is I'm like, I'm not doing this. I'm not committing to this to get a bunch of bikers for stolen motorcycle parts or things like that. We're either going to go all in, try to get to, Mother Club, and we're going to go after legit charges, or we're not going to do it at all. And so we started working towards that. But as the case is going on, and I always said this is like dumb luck, which would help in the case. And there was dumb luck that just kept me around. But like things in one of the reasons why I was like, hey, this has to end, because people are always like, oh, you worried the Pagan's going to kill you. Well, yeah, sure. If they found out, and especially is they would realize how much evidence you had on them. Number two was, the Hells Angels were a big threat. The motorcycle itself was a threat. And so like there were two different instances. One where I was supposed to be doing guard duty in front of the clubhouse. I got kicked out of the club. It's kind of a long story, but it had nothing to do with me. But a national vice president tried to take over the club, become the president. He got beaten out of the club, and everyone he vouched for got thrown out. So I got thrown out. So I wasn't out doing guard duty. Well, that night, the Hells Angels surrounded the club, and the sergeant at arms was out there, and they beat him near to death. Beat him with ball peen hammers, and it was a horrible situation. He got med flighted out. He ultimately survived, but that would have been me standing there if I hadn't got kicked out of the club. And another example was Hogman, this guy I told you, not the greatest of humans. We had pulled out, we'd been on this long run, and I was the highest ranking person when we got back, and the chapter president sent us out. Highest ranking rides front left. And we pulled out the chapter president's house, and he was the vice president, which has no status unless the president dies. So I pull out front left because I'm the highest ranking Pagan. He pulls around me to get to the front left. And it's like, okay, I'm a make-believe biker. I don't really care. You want to ride front left? Ride front left. We made it maybe a quarter mile down the road, and he got splattered by a minivan, and it wasn't his fault. It was the minivan's fault, and it would have been me. And so it's like, okay, how many times? And he coded out. They actually brought him back to life. He coded out 3 times. They brought him back to life. But like, how many times are you going to be able to play Russian roulette where it's not going to go off on you? And so, at some point, you're like, hey, you've got to, we've got to wrap this thing up.
Wow.
So. Back to you, and I know I just digressed and didn't.
That's incredible. Yeah, a lot of luck.
So in the end, the first phase of this, we took down 20 Pagans, and the charges range from attempted murder conspiracy, explosives, traffic. I bought bombs, and that's a story we're sharing. firearms, armed narcotics trafficking. So there are a lot of very substantive charges that were brought against, and ultimately in the long run, there was a bunch of motions. The court process went on for about 4 years, but ultimately nobody went to trial. The evidence was overwhelming. I had 1,200 hours of recordings, audio recordings, about 200 hours of video recordings. They ultimately all pled guilty and were sentenced.
Wow. And I mean, what? So you didn't have to go to trial. Did they even find out that you were the rat then? So I'm not saying rat. Sorry, I don't know how to say it, but like, that's not, did they even find out you were the rat? Like, no, I've been watching a lot of mafia movies lately. But what happens at the end then? Like, you just disappear and they have to know it's you.
Yeah, so they knew. So the night of the takedown, it initiated about 1 o'clock in the morning. I was doing a large meth deal with an individual known as Hellboy. He was an MMA fight, really bad person, and they didn't want to go in the house after him. So they're like, hey, if you can lure him out, do this deal, we'll rip him on the street, we'll hold him on ice, and then we'll do the search warrants at 6 a.m. and all the arrest warrants. And so they ultimately, I did this deal with him. They arrested him, and they told him, they said, hey, Slam's a cop. And he refused to believe it. He's like, listen, I believe a lot of pagans might be a cop. Slam, no way is Slam a cop. And he wouldn't believe it. And so they went and executed the search warrants and the arrest warrants, and they recovered a bunch more firearms. They got some more explosive devices. And I had said earlier on the explosive device, and I think it's a very quick story, but entertaining to show that you don't always have control. I knew they had these bombs, and they were legit devices, and I kept trying to get to them or figure out where they were so we could get to them.
I know they beefed with the mafia. I know they beefed, like what were the bombs for?
So they referred to them as Christmas presents. And in part of the underlying murder conspiracy is they were going to use these Christmas presents. The plan was to blow up Hell's Angels gas station. It was a family-owned gas station. They were going to blow up the gas station. They were going to lob these things off an overpass of the freeway when the Hell's Angels were on a run underneath. And so these high explosives were wrapped with steel bars. And so, being in the military, that shrapnel and the damage, that's not just going to take out a bunch of bikers. It's going to take out everyone on the Long Island freeway.
Yeah.
So we were like, hey, we have to figure out who the bomb maker is, number one. Number two, where are they? And so if I had said when I was on Long Island, like, hey, I'm going to blow up Kate. Well, they're not going to give me a bomb to go blow up Kate. They're going to go blow up Kate. So I would have no control over, how to do it. So I tied it back to my lobstering backstory. And I said, hey, lobstering gets ugly out there. And it does, legitimately, if we're out there poaching lobsters, like lobstermen take that stuff real serious. And so I got into a run and gun battle, blah, blah, blah. The guy put sugar in the tanks of my boat. I'm going to blow up his boat. I want to sink it. So they're like, we might be able to hook you up, but it was nothing definitive. And so Izzo, one of the pagans, had come up to, part of my backstory also, I did collections for my boss. He did some loan shark and I did some collections. So he came up to help me on those. And we met at the 99, grabbed a bite to eat, had a beer. And all of a sudden I get up to go to the bathroom and he follows me in the bathroom. It's kind of weird. And so I'm at the urinal, I'm going to the bathroom. And he's like kind of standing behind me. He's got a trench coat on. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? So I finished turn. And he opens his trench coat, almost like a flasher. And he's got one of these bombs in his pocket, like inside the trench coat. And I'm like, holy shit, we're in a 99 restaurant. He's got a bomb in here. So now I got to get him out of this restaurant and not look like I'm freaking out about a bomb being in a 99 restaurant. And so I'm like, all right, hey, listen, bro, why don't you go by the car? I'm going to play the tab. We got to get going. We got to go make these collections. And so we got out there and I was like, hey, listen, the boat's not in right now. Cause he wanted to go blow the boat up and I didn't have a boat to blow up.
Right.
And so I'm like, the boat's out. He's like, oh, we can wait. I'm like, dude, they go out 2-3 days. I said, listen, my boss will give us a couple $100. Let's just, and there was a Dunkin' Donuts big cup there. I said, let's put this thing in here and leave it here. And then let's go do the collections. So we left it in my car. We took his car and went and did the collections. And then ultimately, he wanted the money. So he kept the money and I said, listen, I'll use this thing. And then, that's that. And so he's like, okay. So he took off and the bomb squad came and they were like, hey, if this thing went off here, all of us would be dead.
Wow.
But the funny thing is the pagans aren't stupid. When we got back the next day, we had church, and Sergeant Arms brought up in church. He's like, "Where's the Christmas present?" And I'm like, "Oh, it got used." And he's like, "You know who says that? Cops. We don't leave explosives behind. That's what cops do, blah, blah, blah." And I was thinking he was talking about me. I'm like, "Oh man, this gig's up."
Yeah.
But what he assumed was my boss was the cop. And he's like, "If I end up in a fucking jail cell, you two clowns better hope you're nowhere near me, because I'm going to kill both of you." And he's like, "I want proof that boat went." I said, "Well, I'm a diver." I said, "I'll go get photos, whatever." And long story short, they eventually forgot about it and it went off. But it was things like that, like you can't plan for.
Holy shit. Yeah. I wouldn't have made it a single day. I wouldn't have lasted one single day. I would have been like, all right, I got something to tell you guys. That's just crazy. Now, do you still, once the case ended, I mean, you have a family, were there threats against you, or what was the aftermath?
Yeah. So afterwards they put out 2 contracts on me, to have me killed. And there was some active movement on their part. And there was investigation launched, and they was active. They weren't able to, they were able to show that it was happening. They weren't able to prove who was driving, behind it. They had, agents, guarding me for months. They monitor also. I mean, I won't go into all the details, but and still to this day, my agency, monitors a whole lot of things to make sure that nobody's circling looking for me. It'd be a mistake to come after me, because they'll find out very quickly. But yeah, so but listen, you take precautions, you look over your shoulder, and and then the transition back to normal life. It's a transition. It's not like something you do overnight.
I imagine going back to your desk at the ATF after that for a few weeks or months or whatever isn't the same thrill as hopping on your Harley and going out to sell meth with the pagans, so it's a slightly different vibe.
Yeah, and they give you time, they give you a period to kind of unwind and reconnect with your family. But when you're in long-term undercover, that you have to see a shrink every 6 months to make sure you're not going to the dark side, because we've lost people to the dark side.
Yeah.
But if you ask a shrink, they'll tell you, "Oh no, hell no, I could smoke you out." I have a good buddy of mine. He's like, "I'd pick you out if you went to the dark side right out of the gate." But the transition back though is, it's weird, because the family's moved on. And you're trying to get caught back up. And so from my wife and I, it was a concerted effort where we basically just started dating again. And, we would designate times, a couple times a week, where we would just go on dates. Sometimes we'd be at home. We just tell the girls, "Hey, we're not here."
Yeah.
We were able to, build it back over time. And I will tell you, things happen for a reason. And, my wife's always famous for saying that, but in the end, our relationship was never stronger. And so I think at some level you kind of appreciate what you like. I think people take people for granted until they, until that becomes at risk.
Yeah.
And then when you get it back, you're like, "Hey, you know what? This is why I got into this marriage in the first place. And this is why I'm not going to let it go stale."
Yeah. And I imagine now that the book is out and you're doing, like, your family has to, because I'm sure there's things that even, especially your kids, didn't even know about. How has their reaction been to finding all this out about you?
They're at an age now where they understand it a lot more. They were younger then, although they knew, we always try. We never had conversations in front of them about what was going on, but they saw their dad look like a shitbag.
Kids are smart. Yeah. Kids know more than you think.
And they heard things like, my daughter, 2 of my daughters play hockey. And so I was at one of the games, and I seen one of the girls on the bench, and she had said to me, "Hey, coach, we hadn't seen you around," because I used to coach the team. And I'm like, I said, "Yeah, I've been busy with work." She goes, "Yeah, we heard you were partying with Roadblock." I'm like, oh my God, like, how do they even heard that name? And so you do realize that they knew a lot more. They're the big reason, them and my wife, because I had no intention of writing a book. And they were the big reason why they're like, "Hey, this story needs to be told. It needs to be, memorialized, because someday you're not going to be around, and people need to know, like, this is the type of work that ATF does, and that law enforcement does, and that there's a lot that goes into it." So, ultimately they're what drove me to do it.
And final question, do you still love to ride? Do you still like to get out there, or has it kind of ruined it for you? Like, no, you know what? Magic is gone.
Great question. So I had a bike before the case and during the case. And then of course I had my undercover bike. But when I came out, I sold my bike.
Yeah.
I was done riding. The riding was not, you're riding 100 miles an hour, you're riding a gear down, you're 2 feet off the person in front of you. And believe it or not, everyone thinks bikers can really know how to ride a bike. Some are really good, others not so much.
Yeah.
I had gotten away from it for a few years, other than I was still doing some undercover work. And so I was still using the bike for some of that, but not for joy. And, but recently I've gotten back into riding again and all that. So it's come back, but it was a while, when I didn't.
Sometimes you got to step away for then I was a minivan guy for a few years and just really keeping it on 4 wheels. And then I guess I do have one last question. I'm probably keeping you too long here.
No.
I kept saying through the beginning, I'm like, wow, there's so many military parallels to this. Did you see a high number of military personnel in these groups? Because I know a lot of guys go looking for brotherhood after they get out and yada, yada. Was that part of the reason it was structured the way it was? Was there a lot of military?
So there were some, I wouldn't say a lot. I will say this. So there's, the term 1%er comes that only 1% are outlaws, and that comes back from military study back in the 50s. But the reality is there were definitely some ex-military that were in there, but there was ex-everything in there.
Yeah.
So now we would go to events, biker events. And so they would be, dubbed pagan events, meaning that outlaw organization controlled it from the outlaw side, but there'd be all sorts of other biker gangs. And there were a lot of military biker, groups, and not gangs, they're clubs.
Yeah.
There were law enforcement ones, and in some cases, law enforcement ones acted worse than the outlaw ones. But they, so there were a lot of groups, but inside the pagans, there were some, but I know there's some people out there saying, "Oh, it's all ex-military and this, that, and the other," and that's not what I saw.
Okay.
A percentage of it, but I will say there's a lot of military who are in bike clubs, and I think part of it is that, and they have that structure. They'll have sergeant arms. I always laugh about it because I'm like, what arms do you have? But I think it's because, to your point, they like that brotherhood, they like that structure, and so they gravitate to that. But
it's a good model to.
Yeah, and I don't think most are gravitating to being outlaws, and that's what these guys are. They're an outlaw criminal organization.
Well, super interesting. Riding with Evil, Ken Croke. Again, Sons of Anarchy meets Departed is such a great description. And I basically, where can you get the book?
It's everywhere, and I wrote it with my partner Dave Wedge, who did a great job of taking my story and turning it into a book. And so it's everywhere. It's Amazon, Barnes and Noble, almost every bookstore, and so I appreciate that plug, and hopefully people like it.
Very cool. I would ask, where can people find you? But I'm not going to this time. I'm going to let that one fly. Ken, thank you so much. Yeah, I did not know much about motorcycle gangs, really, except, do you remember the Marine Corps birthday ball when I rode with I'm blanking on the name of the group right now, but it's a Marine Corps motorcycle group.
What was the guy's name? Death Trap?
We're still buddies. We message each other from time to time on social media, but his name was Death Trap. And as I'm riding with him, I was like, so why do they call you Death Trap? He's like, oh, it's because I crashed so many times. I was like, oh shit. And I thought it was interesting asking him, like, well, at least did you enjoy riding your motorcycles with these guys? And he's like, I was surprised, like, they're not as skilled of riders as you think. They ride nut to butt, essentially. And I've always wondered this. Drinking and driving is illegal, but their main hangout spots are always bars.
Yeah.
So I feel like I would just be curious to see the average motorcycles.
You're not telling me that motorcycle gangs are breaking the law.
I'm gonna say it. I feel like they're breaking the law. After hearing that interview.
Did you know that this is against the law?
Yeah. I also thought it was interesting too. Like, he talked about, like, when you lie, how hard it is to keep up with a lie. Imagine doing that for 2 years with people who might kill you if they find out. Like,
oh yeah, like, I would imagine you would get killed for sure.
Like Katie Stolen Valor, I for sure would get killed. I don't remember real things that happened to me, let alone a lie world that I made up. So that's fucking crazy. But just a really interesting person. Riding with Evil, I might make that my beach read. I'm gonna get that book for sure. So thank you to Ken.
All right, let's move on to round number 5. We're going to talk a little bit about some foxes on Capitol Hill that are causing a stir.
Yes. And so have you heard of denning season?
Like when foxes go to essentially hibernate?
Sort of. It's cat denning season. It's on CBS. Tune in. It's no, just kidding. No, you didn't laugh at all. Kat Dennings is an actress. She did the Waitress show. She got giant. Uncle Roo.
What waitress show?
2 girls and 1 restaurant or whatever. What is it? Kat Dennings. You know what I'm talking about? The restaurant gals. Oh my God. You're making me feel weird, but I'm not weird.
2 waitresses.
Yes. It's maybe the name of the show.
Okay.
Whatever. Thanks for Denning season is Mama Fox is moving to like temporary
You're
apartments.
breathing and swallowing. It's so weird right now.
I'm so congested. I feel like my
What
head's
is
going?
going? Somebody send Kate some fucking Sudafed, please.
No kid. I got whatever the baby has, and we're both just. I'm telling you, I've just snot just dripping down my face. I'm just using like.
Who is the person you're talking about again?
Kat Dennings, but that's besides the point.
Okay.
It doesn't matter now. It's Denning season.
Kat Jennings.
This is about foxes.
Okay.
So God damn it, Denning season. Mama foxes leave the boonies kind of, and they sort of migrate towards more populous areas to create little dens to have their babies, which we call them kits when they have their little babies.
Kat Denning is also known for her roles in Max Black and CBS's sitcom Two Broke Girls is what it's called.
2 broke girls. 2 broke girls.
Different
That's
from
what
2
it is.
waitresses. She was in that. She
But she
made
was a
her
waitress.
acting debut and appeared in such films as 40-Year-Old Virgin, Big Mama's House 2, which was released in 2006, and Charlie Bartlett, the House Bunny as well, and Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist. All right, so let's move on with this story about the fox at the Capitol.
Denning season.
Mm-hmm.
That was. Do you see the joke now? I
Yeah.
said it's Denning season on CBS.
Her
Upcoming
last
Denning
name
season.
is Dennings. Got it. It's Cat with a K, in case you're wanting to Google it at home.
I'm gonna say this one more time, and then we're never circling back on it. It's Denning season for foxes.
Okay.
The mama foxes create dens, and a lot of them go to places that are more populous to do this because they know that wolves and other predators won't be in these more populous areas. So they'll find abandoned housings, under people's porches. They kind of go towards humans, a lot of them, these little red foxes, because it's actually kind of safer for their babies. So it's not that crazy to see them in the spring in more populous areas. And so in Washington, D.C., every spring or whatever, like I was reading this article from Ocean City, Maryland, they're like, people get all excited. Oh, there's foxes on the boardwalk. How exciting. Well, it's denning season, my friend.
And they'll den right there, like outside, not in a hotel, because they just basically form a spot like 2 broke girls.
Right. Yes, exactly. It's cat denning season. Anyway, so this past week, people were seeing this red fox on Capitol Hill. Like there's photos of this fox like running across the National Mall, all over the place, like right near the steps of the Capitol Hill, whatever. All fine and dandy, very thrilling for people. And still, it starts kind of snarling at tourists.
Mm-hmm.
And next thing you know, on the 5th of April, it starts biting people, like at random, literally right outside of the Capitol building. This woman, her at Zemina Bastillo, she is a journalist, and she wrote, this is at 3:00 p.m. on the 5th of April, that feeling when you get bit by a fox leaving the Capitol, because of course that's something I expect in the middle of DC. It bit from behind me while I was walking. I didn't even see it.
Bit me.
Yeah, right on the buttocks. They took her immediately to the White House for Dr. Peppers so she would feel better. It bit from
Sources
behind
saying
me.
she must have drank about 14 while she was with the president.
Well, the worst part, she shared this on Twitter that she got bit by the fox. Immediately, people are like, well, you shouldn't have been messing with the fox. You shouldn't have been poking at the fox. She's like, guys, it bit me from behind while I was walking. I didn't even see it. I'm from Idaho. I know not to try and pet it. Okay, I'm not an idiot.
I don't
okay,
feel like anybody can say boo about it. If you drop I'm from Idaho when you're talking foxes or wolves, people just got to trust your expertise.
110%. Absolutely. Then
it was probably men that were explaining to her too. Ridiculous.
It was, men are always fox-splaining.
Fucking worst.
Always.
They always just have this bucket of crabs mentality.
Especially during denning
fucking
season.
sick
They
of it.
watch 2 waitresses one time and they think that they know everything about cat dennings. It's the
And
worst.
they don't.
They don't. And we're going to have her on the show soon to talk about denning
Yeah, it's
season.
going to be fantastic. We can talk about the time that she starred in a film that was won an award at the 2010 Toronto International Film Festival.
That was 2010 was big time denning season. Anyway, Representative, is it Amy or Ami Berra?
Amy.
He was bit by the fox the other night too, same on the 5th. He described the attack, which occurred near the Russell building, as unprovoked. I didn't see it, and then all of a sudden I felt something lunge at the back of my leg, Berra said. I jumped and got my umbrella, he continues. Good thing he wasn't friends with you, because he wouldn't have been allowed to carry an umbrella, probably, because you're
exactly
anti-umbrella.
right. I got a Jeopardy question that was about an umbrella right yesterday too.
Berra went on to act out how he spun around quickly using his umbrella to scare the fox away. Someone was like, hey, a fox is attacking that guy, he said. So like other people were just standing around watching him get attacked by a fox. Imagine you're a tourist and you see a congressperson on the hill and you're like, oh, how exciting. And then you see a fox attack them. What a treat.
Oh, that would be incredible, especially if it was somebody I didn't like.
Oh, for sure.
Like if you had a fox just trying to nibble at all Lindsey Graham's ladybugs.
I knew immediately where that was going. Capitol Police came out and then the fox ran away. It was the most
got a mouthful of ladybugs. Be careful.
Berra then showed a photo of his suit that had two
ladybugs. Oh.
Nibbling the ladybugs. That's good luck. That's good luck though when they do that. This congressman has the cutest little, like, it looks like boop, no bite marks. It looks like a little vampire went boom. It's this tiniest little through his suit. And then Capitol Police finally got the fox, and then they found she did have kits. She did have little pups nearby that they took. Hopefully those don't have rabies, and hopefully they are taken. I'm sure they'll be taken care of and taken somewhere safe. So that's a good thing. But it's crazy if there's one animal with rabies on the hill, that means there's a bunch of animals with rabies on the hill. Please note,
explains a lot of the actions over the last like 4 or 5 years.
It really does. The
whole squad just got rabies. They're just brimming with rabies all the time.
What if that was the case?
It wouldn't surprise me at all. Like if there was some type of what was it called? The Havana syndrome, just for a congressman, but it has to deal with being attacked by foxes all the time.
I mean, again, I kind of can see it. The amount of bad Fox News jokes that were taking place around this event was just, I mean, come on, people. But everybody who got bit, you have 72 hours. If you get bit with rabies, you have within 72 hours to get the shot. Otherwise, it's nearly 100% fatal. And if people don't get their animals vaccinated, that shit can spread like super quick. In New York State, there had only been like 50 cases over however many years. Do you know if the rabies
vaccine for animals FDA approved?
Ooh, that's a great question.
It's a tough one.
I heard they're microchipping animals too now. They're tracking them.
We had a fox at our church a couple months ago, and it had lived there for a couple months, and nobody said anything about it. We always liked it because when you're chilling outside, it would show up on the roof of the church. It would get up there from time to time and walk around. Never bothered anybody. And there's a dude that got a fox trap from the city and put it out on our church's campus without telling anybody, and had it removed to a different area of the hill country. I swear to God, I told my wife, take our automatic withdrawal like that we donate to the church like every month. I said, take it off. I don't want to give any for 6 months. We're not giving any money to the church because they mess with this fox. Because it was the only thing that I liked about the church at the time. That was the only thing. We're not doing anything. We're occasionally going and having like a picnic lunch so the kids can hang out with their friends. And now I got to deal with no fox. That was the only thing that gave me joy when I was there.
Foxes are beautiful. When I was a kid, Philly burbs, but kind of boonies-ish. And foxes, like I said, they live in the cities and stuff too. There's every now and then Manhattan has wolves. Hand to God, like look it up. They go through Central Park and shit. It's crazy. But there was a fox that used to run across the street whenever I was waiting for the bus, and I loved that little fox. And there's a guy I follow on TikTok who he and his family moved to Colorado up in the mountains, and he plays his guitar outside, and this whole family of foxes comes and they sit and watch him like every day. It's really cool.
God,
but
what a dream that would be.
Yeah, but not with rabies. Rabies is
Mm-mm.
not good. It's a spicy meatball.
It is. All right, let's move on to some save rounds and alibis before I get to mine. We mentioned bucket of crabs mentality, and we had no idea what it was. We said it over and over and over again, and we actually got somebody to explain it to us on Instagram.
Yeah, and well, I got a DM from a ZBT listener named Brooks Rose, who said it means if you put more than one crab in a bucket, they won't be able to get out because they pull each other down. So last week we had bucket of crabs mentality, people shitting on a National Guardsman, one who had not made
the other guy
terrorist
said
threats.
this is a good explanation. Pretty sure he's referring to crabs holding each other down in a bucket when in groups. If I can't escape, then neither can you. If you see someone succeeding and you try to pull them down, you have a bucket of crabs mentality.
A bucket of, I'd never heard that before, but I love it.
It's a beautiful analogy.
I'm for sure a bucket of crabs person.
Yeah, I feel like
Yeah,
I am
I'm always
too.
seeing how well you're doing, and I'm like,
It depends on how well, like in what category. Like if you're doing real well in fashion, I'm like, okay. But if you're doing real well in like money, I'm like, man, that guy's a jerk.
I saw your pool was nice and ready to go, so I said, I'm not doing the sheet today. Fuck that guy.
Because you're having a bucket of crabs mentality.
I was
All
having
right,
a
let's
bucket of
move on to
crabs
save
mentality.
rounds and alibis. Nicholas, what you got, pal?
It's a save round. Just to remind everyone, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Numbers are climbing still, but we still want to get over that 10K hump. So please go there and subscribe.
Exactly right. We want to subscribe. All right, what do you got for your save round, Kate?
Okay, number one, we have talked about this a couple times on the show now, the Barstool Fund.
Mm-hmm.
We, Zero Block 30, $3 million worth of funds that we want to get out. We're not seeking donations. We're trying to give money away to veteran-run businesses that really, truly need it. And we've gotten hundreds of submissions so far, but as I'm going through the submissions, there's a couple things that I feel like I didn't clarify good enough. The business has to have been affected by COVID, and you have to say how it's been affected by COVID. So
and
maybe
so that being said, it has to be established before 2020.
You're right. We're getting so, and I'm loving these businesses. It's so cool to see veterans starting businesses, but we're getting a lot of people submitting that just started their business right as COVID hit, or that started their business after COVID hit.
Or they're in the barracks with other like privates and lance corporals, like talking about what business they could do together.
Yeah. I'm getting submissions of people saying like, here's what the business I want to start. And it sounds awesome. It sounds like, and things people should take to Shark Tank or something like that, but that's not what the fund is for. We're looking for veteran run businesses owned
or
and operated
nonprofits.
Or that are really established and that have employees and that have been around for a good amount of time. And we want to give one-time grants that will majorly help your business. So if
could
you
be up to like
$100,000,
just so
could be a lot of money.
So if you have like a big thing, that it doesn't have to just be a super small business. If you're struggling and you need more money than like $10,000 or whatever, you can indicate that on the application that we have. We've been going through them, or Kate's been going through them, and I've been having people DM me about which ones. There's been some great ones, like an oyster farm, for example. An oyster farm had to lay off
a bowling alley in Boston. And there's been some great. So if
you run a VFW and you're struggling on paying the bills or something like that, that's something that we could help with.
But please apply. And if you're listening to this and you know a veteran run business in your community who maybe doesn't follow ZBT because they live under a rock or something, I mean, but please let them know. We will we have the link up on our ZBT social media. We'll push that out again. But please, I mean, this is such an amazing opportunity for veteran run businesses. The Barstool Fund wants to help, and that's the Barstool difference. So,
and Nick, can you put the link to the Barstool Fund in the YouTube comments or the YouTube description here?
Sweet.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And we'll keep going through the submissions, and, it's so cool to see so many veterans running their own businesses. ZBT listener Brendan Carrick asked us to shout out the Coast Guard this week, and for good reason. Admiral Linda Fagan has been nominated as the 27th Commandant of the U.S. Coast Guard, and thus she is the first woman ever to lead a U.S. military service. The comments on the Coast Guard's post were full of people saying what an awesome leader she is, which is great. So many people are like, oh, I served under her back in whatever. She's fucking awesome, blah, blah, blah. They didn't say fucking, it's the Coast Guard, a little nerdier over there, but that was the gist of it. So that's really
Sometimes
cool to
they cuss a little.
They do a little bit, so every now and then. Yeah.
What do they say?
TikTok. We're big TikTok hoops over here.
Oh, yeah.
Fun fact, whenever the Coast Guard changes over to a new commandant, do you know what the thing is? Like in the Marine Corps, when you change commandants, you have a big ceremony. Do you know what it is that the Coast Guard does? Fun fact.
Let's see. What do they do? I have no idea.
They actually lower the old commandant in one of those Coast Guard rescue baskets down into the sea.
Oh, damn.
That's it. And then the new commandant boogie boards in a neon body glove suit on a neon boogie board, and they boogie board to shore, fucking shredding as the old bucket sinks with the old commandant.
We actually have the audio of that. Here it is.
Bye, guys.
Bye, buddy.
Bye, buddy. Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, buddy.
Sound the retreat.